Om Jnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshur-unmilitam yena Tasmai Shri-Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya-manobhishtam Stapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudire Nashtaprayeshu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna. So we're reading today from Canto 3, Chapter 14, Text 26. Title of the chapter is Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening. It's a famous chapter, and it's the precursor to the birth of the great demons who are actually devotees of Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, who then have much stage on the Bhagavatam drama as the Bhagavatam unfolds in future cantos. So it's an important event that happens here. And specifically, the event is a man and wife get together for sexual intercourse. That's a very common activity in this world. But in the Bhagavatam setting, this is glorified in some sense. An entire chapter is presented of just how a husband and a wife come together for union. Because the Bhagavatam, ultimately, everything is connected to Krishna. Everything is connected to divinity and bhakti. And a seemingly ordinary and ubiquitous event that happens all over the world with all men and women who are married or even not married, or all species of life. But there's such detail that's given in this chapter about those two, man and woman coming together, because of the importance of what is going to unfold, and how it's ultimately connected to God, and how it's ultimately connected to bhakti, and it's extremely relevant and instructive and edifying for each one of us. So the section that we're reading from is text 26 today. And the section, just to give context, is where Diti has, out of being this surcharge of emotion, you could say urge, not even emotion, but urge for having union with a husband, which generally one of the qualities of a lady is to be shy. And one of the crowning qualities of a lady is to be shy, according to the Bhagavatam. Prabhupada would speak about that a lot. And here we see that Diti disregards that quality, disregards the fences that surround her socially, culturally, and pushes through that fence of shyness to invite, and even stronger, strongly insist that a husband has union with her, despite the time of day, despite the other aspects of the environment, the ethos of the time, she was unable to restrict herself. It was just such a powerful force. That force was in Sanskrit is known as Vega. Vega means force, which I find it really interesting that Las Vegas, or if you would say Vega is a force, then those Vegas or those forces, Las Vegas is simply a place of urges anyway. And so Diti is being pushed to have this union with her husband. And despite her husband being a great devotee and a very wise sage, Kashyapa Muni tries to calm her down. She's unable to receive that message, that calmness, because the urge is very strong. So the section that we're reading from, text 26, is where Kashyapa is giving some reason of why that Diti can wait for a more appropriate time so that they can engage in union to ultimately bring about good children. So the reason he's giving is because Lord Shiva is passing by with his ghostly followers, and his ghostly followers and those who are just in unembodied state, these spirit souls in unembodied states, are following Lord Shiva. And if during that time there's union between a man and woman, it is said that Lord Shiva puts one of those ghostly persons into the womb of Diti, or into the womb of that woman, and in this case Diti. So Kashyapa is saying, please let's wait for a while. Bhagavatam says a few seconds. I don't know how exactly the muhurtas are calculated of when Lord Shiva is traveling along with his ghostly followers. But what's really beautiful as we study this section of the Bhagavatam is when Diti approaches him with such an urge, one could say in a malintentioned kind of urge, or unrestricted. It's very easy to judge someone and to blame them and criticize them. But what we see is a very beautiful way of how Kashyapa first glorifies, appreciates, connects with Diti and understands and empathizes with her urge and her emotion. And he's saying, my only request is, could you just wait for a little bit? He doesn't blame her. He doesn't condemn her for being pushy. He deals with her in such a gentle and loving manner that for any husband, it's super instructive of how to deal with one's wife in a very wholesome way. So awesome example of Kashyapa Muni in interacting with his wife. So now we come to this verse specifically. We're going to now zoom into this verse of text 26 of how Lord Shiva, or how Kashyapa Muni is explaining to Diti the greatness of Lord Shiva, and why he does that is also explained. I'm going to share my screen here. Is it visible and big enough?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yes.
Okay. Nayasya loke swajana parova natyadrito nota kaschid vigarhya vayam vrateryat charana pavidham ashasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. So here he says, translation, purport by Prabhupada, Lord Shiva regards no one as his relative, yet there is no one who is not connected with him. He does not regard anyone as very favorable or abominable. We respectfully worship the remnants of his foodstuff, and we vow to accept whatever is rejected by him. Purport by our great Acharya. Nice purport. Kashyapa informed his wife that just because Lord Shiva happened to be his brother-in-law, that should not encourage her in her offense towards him. Kashyapa warned her that actually Lord Shiva is not connected with anyone, nor is anyone his enemy. Since he's one of the three controllers of universal affairs, he's equal to everyone. His greatness is incomparable because he's a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is said that among all the devotees of the Personality of Godhead, Lord Shiva is the greatest. Thus, the remnants of foodstuff left by him are accepted by other devotees as Mahaprasad, a great spiritual foodstuff. The remnants of foodstuff offered to Lord Krishna are called prasad. But when the same prasad is eaten by a great devotee like Lord Shiva, it is called Mahaprasad. Lord Shiva is so great that he does not care for the material prosperity for which every one of us is so eager. Parvati, who is the powerful material nature personified, is under his full control as his wife. Yet he does not use her even to build a residential house. He prefers to remain without shelter, and his great wife also agrees to live with him humbly. People in general worship Goddess Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva, for material prosperity, but Lord Shiva engages her in his service without material desire. Prabhupada spending some time with this message. He simply advises his wife, or his great wife, that of all kinds of worship, the worship of Vishnu is the highest, and greater than that is the worship of a great devotee or anything in relation to Vishnu. So back to the verse here, Nayasya loke swajana parova natyadrito nota kaschid vigarhya. The first two lines, very common in describing the qualities of Krishna or Vishnu, as we see in the Ishopanishad and many other examples, is there are two facets of something that generally cannot be applied to a person of this conditioned soul of this world, but they apply to Krishna. And Krishna can simultaneously resolve paradoxes. So here we see the first line says, Nayasya loke swajana. No one in this world is his swajana. Swajana means relative, one's own. And then para means someone different, or in this case, unconnected. So there's no one in this world who is swajana or para. No one's his relative, but no one's not connected to him. Similarly, we'll see in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, text 29, Krishna says, no one's dear to me, and I'm not envious of anyone. I'm trying to forget the verse now. Anyway, if someone remembers, please remind me.
Samoham sarvabhuteshu.
Samoham sarvabhuteshu na me dvesha asti na priyaha. So no one's envious. I'm not envious of anyone, and I'm not very dear to anyone. Like that. Or in Ishopanishad, he's na dureta dvantike. So he's far and he's also near. So there's these contradictions, and the first line and the second line is showing some kind of contradiction, but it's resolved in great personalities such as Krishna, or in this case, Lord Shiva. And the second line says, Na ati adrito. Adrita is a nice word. Adrita means to respect, of offer regard to. Na ati. He does not give too much respect to, means he doesn't worship anyone. And then kaschid vigarhya. He doesn't, vigarhya means to condemn. He doesn't criminalize, or he doesn't condemn anyone either. He doesn't greatly worship someone, nor does he condemn anyone. He's, generally equal to all. So that's the first two lines. The second two lines are discussing this point about he's so great that his prasad, what he rejects, right? Apavidham, what his lotus feet reject, we accept with great worship. And that's his foodstuffs. Bhukta bhogam, his great foodstuffs. Even though he rejects it, we heartily accept it. So that's what the verse is saying. I'm going to stop sharing and speak some of the messages from the pulpit. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who understands the inner conversations that happen either in great devotees or in Krishna's mind through the Bhagavatam, he explains, the way he writes it in his commentary is, Diti says to her husband, I have said farewell to shyness and fear. Even you should not be afraid because ultimately he's your relative. Because Kashyapa was married to Diti, and Diti's younger sister was Parvati, or Sati, who was married to Lord Shiva. So she's telling Lord Shiva, as I said, she's telling Kashyapa that you're the brother-in-law of Lord Shiva, and therefore you're related to him. And since you're related to him, there's some degree of kinship. And if there's kinship, why would your relative cause some kind of grievance for you? Don't worry about it. I have forgotten all shyness and fear. Shiva is like, part of the family. And this verse is Kashyapa's response to that message of Diti. And this verse is saying that Shiva, Kashyapa is saying, Shiva is not anybody's relative, but nor does he, and he doesn't condemn anyone, nor is he unconnected to anyone. So it is very common. It's very easy for us, conditioned souls, to take something that's close to us, that we're familiar with, and that may be very great. It's very easy to become familiar and not offer proper regard, like Diti is doing for Lord Shiva. Very easy to do that, and we have to be aware of it. It's something that generally a devotee walks with caution, speaks with caution, and cognizance at least, that we don't want to become too familiar, especially with the holy name, with the deity form, with the devotees. I'll share a little story on this topic, and it was very edifying for me. So there were a couple of devotees in the temple. They were dancing at it was a Sunday feast or a festival, I don't remember. And they were dancing and dancing and dancing, and they were running from one side of the temple to the other side of the temple. The altar space had like a rope that was kept on two sides, and so it was preventing people from getting into the altar. So these devotees, as they were dancing from side to side, and then they somehow tripped as they were headed towards the altar side, and they both kind of fell into the altar. And I watched the responses of both devotees. One devotee was super regretful. Oh my goodness, we committed offense, so we just barged into the deity area, into the altar. The other devotee didn't have the same regret or any regret, and simply said, these things happen. It's just part of, having fun. And that's it. And that sense of not feeling regret for crossing a line, literally in this life, in this case was a crossing a line, um, you know, I didn't feel comfortable with it. I said that's not right. You could intuitively, that's just not okay. And some years later, that devotee ended up in jail for some other major lines that they crossed. So this point of getting too familiar with especially aspects of divinity that we are being gifted, whether it be devotees or deities or holy name or dham or so many other things that we've been gifted, is very important. We have to be careful. That's the point. Not so careful that we become averse to become intimate with, let's say, devotees, but careful enough that we don't cross a line. And sometimes we cross lines, but having that regret and then making amends as needed is important and is nice. Some of us may have heard from Srila Rampat Swami. He gave the example of somebody, kind of poking some teasing remarks at Maharaj, and then that person, Maharaj just took it lightly, but that person, recognized, oh, maybe that was something I shouldn't have done, and he came back and, out of his good character, apologized to Maharaj for that. Maharaj said, nothing, don't worry about it. Right? But here we see Diti is not having that regret. Of course, she regrets in this chapter, but right now, especially when urges are very strong, one's discriminatory power is weak. And for her, this urge of Uddara, so we hear of 6 different urges, right? Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udaropasta Vegam. These 6 urges, the urge of her that she's dealing with right now is Uddara, the urge of the genitals, and it's pushing her to do things and say things that perhaps normally she would not do. And we learn about Diti's life in this section of Bhagavatam. She's actually quite a great person. But a sense of discrimination is gone to vacation right now. It's sitting in Hawaii. And so she's saying things and doing things that's not okay. And even though he's giving him, he's giving her very good perspective. Look, yeah, Shiva is our relative in one sense, but no, he's actually really great. So be careful of seeing him in a different light. Even Vasudev in the late 80s chapter in the 10th canto, Vasudev goes to the sages and he asks them questions. This is during the meeting in Kurukshetra. And the sages tell Vasudev, why are you asking us? Who you think your son is and that you're very familiar with is actually personality of Godhead. Go ask him questions. So these sages like Narada and others, they direct Vasudev to go and speak to Krishna. And they make the comment that it's common to see one's family members and one's close, intimate friends and so forth as ordinary. And so they said, you're seeing Krishna as ordinary. He's not ordinary. He's a personality Godhead. He instructs us, you please ask your questions to him. And he had very basic questions, actually, Vasudeva, and very beautiful section in the Bhagavatam. Anyway, so then the next point Prabhupada brings up is he says that Lord Shiva is equal to everyone, right? He doesn't condemn anyone, nor does he worship anyone. That's because he's way up there. He's almost Vishnu. He's not Vishnu, but he's almost Vishnu. His tattva is very mysterious. And Shiva, because he's equal to everyone, or because he's one of the controllers, one of his features is that he's equal to everyone. And his Mahaprasadam is very favorable to be taken. Uh, Prabhupada says he doesn't quote it directly, but he is quoting it by his translation. In the end of the Bhagavatam, in the 12th canto, is discussed that Vaishnavanam Yathashambhu, the Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee, and so his prasad is to be considered very divine and powerful. There are three things that are most powerful. Sorry, I was thinking Mahaprasad it's actually the dust of the devotee's feet, but never mind. So we find this power of Mahaprasadam early in the Bhagavatam. Here we are in the third canto, but right in the first canto, uh, in chapter 5 or chapter 6, Narada Muni in his previous life was this young boy that was serving the great sages. He listening carefully to their speech, but it's said that he took the uchishta, or the remnants of the food of the sages, and that gave him the power to be able to hear from the sages and assimilate what they were saying. And so this uchishta, taking the food of the great, or the remnants of the great persons, made Narada Muni who Narada Muni is. Very powerful. So that's why, when great souls come about and we would get the opportunity to receive the Mahaprasadam, we can receive it very eagerly because it gives us spiritual benefit and we can grow. There's one pastime I'm remembering of Prabhupada. So this is the early days, right? When people didn't know how to act and didn't know about culture and so forth. So Mukunda Maharaj in his book, excellent book for those who like to read Prabhupada biographies. Excellent book, very well written, um, very vulnerable, very open. So Mukunda Maharaj, when he took Prabhupada one time to see an ambassador of some country. I can't remember where and whom exactly. So Prabhupada received some dates from this ambassador. It might have been England. It might have been England when Mukunda Maharaj, along with the other five, had gone to England, to London. So he drove him to the ambassador of India or some South Asian country. So he got some dates, and they were driving back, and Prabhupada bit on a date, and he gave it to Mukunda Maharaj to as his prasad, right? So he only ate half of the date or some part of the date, and he gave the rest to Mukunda Maharaj to eat. Mukunda at that time was thinking, why is he giving me a half-chewed date? Like, what is this? That's kind of disgusting. So, so he didn't know what to do. His spiritual master's giving him something, so he figured he'll do something. So he chewed on the other half of the date, and he gave he gave it back to Prabhupada to finish it up. And so he talks about this incident in his book and how that happened. Anyway, of course, later he realized that this is actually a very wonderful thing. What a great opportunity and kindness and compassion of Prabhupada to give me his Uchishta of Mahaprasadam. The last part of the purport, Prabhupada explains this point in several ways, repeats it in so many different ways, that Lord Shiva is married to Parvati, who is the control of material energy and material prosperity. She can give anything. People die to worship Durga, especially in all parts of India, but especially in Bengal. Durga worship is very strong. And why do people worship Durga? Is for receiving some material prosperity. But here we see the husband of Durga doesn't care for it at all. In fact, he doesn't even have a mini hut. He's living in the open space. Completely renounced. And then she, along with him, becomes also completely renounced and humbly serves. The quality that is inspired by that is the quality of atyahar, or not to engage in atyahar. Ati ahar. Ati ahar means too much taking of stuff, either food or collecting of items and stuff. So we see in Lord Shiva's life that he is on the extreme side, right? Gosh, he doesn't sometimes even take a bath because he's got all the ashes around him, on him. So he's very renounced. Um, it's not that one has to necessarily be like that, live in the forest. We would quickly die, especially with this kind of cold climate in Chicago. But it's important to try to capture the principle of not engaging in too much collection of stuff and material prosperity. And it's a tough one. It's really a tough one, especially as grahastas. We go to Costco and buy stuff that's just lasts us for months. Prabhupada gives the example that birds do not, birds and animals only take how much they need. They don't like have a storage area. If there's a bunch of grain that's dropped on the street, pigeons just take 1 or 2 grains and that's it. But if the same grains are dropped on the street, another man might just take the full sack home, like that. So when we go to places like Costco, very popular, there's like 6 buckets of God knows what that'll last you for 6 months. And people do it because, gosh, you're going to save, 36 cents. The mentality, I mean, not that we don't go to Costco, but the mentality that Lord Shiva is inspiring in us by his example is to avoid collecting too much, avoid trying to make life complicated with pursuit of material prosperity and collection of material goods. And it's like I said, it's a little tough as grahastas, but at least our internal mood should be there, and then progressing towards and preparing for the next phase of life, which is vanaprastha. And in vanaprastha, for sure, closer to how Lord Shiva lives is how one is highly recommended and strongly urged to live with very minimal material possessions. So it's important to start thinking about that phase of life and how to enter that life in a wholesome and dignified way. Okay, so I'll pause there. Those were the points that I picked up and wanted to elaborate on from the purport. Any comments or thoughts or questions or reflections of your own from this section that you'd like to share?
Thanks, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I have a question that I've often thought of with respect to such pastimes. And I thought it's appropriate to ask you, since your area is devotee care. In devotee care, we have this principle of consent, right? So seeking consent for stories that are not ours to tell. And in the Bhagavatam, we hear so many stories like this one where, Diti is acting in her lower nature, and it's for posterity to read about and discuss and learn from. And yet, in contemporary life, in our devotee care training, we learn about this, like, ask before you can share somebody else's story. So I just want to ask your thoughts. I mean, one thought that comes to my mind is, because it is for the welfare of all of us fallen conditioned souls, great personalities like her make the sacrifice of revealing their lower nature and being known. But any other thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that's certainly one. We don't know the history of how this was known. At the same time, sometimes when our low natures come out, it can be assumed that, we may not, in other words, we may have something that may be secret. We think it's confidential, but it may not be, just because it's quite visible by the effects of it. For example, the great sage Kashyapa, to have a son like Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, How the heck did that happen? Pretty clear. That would have happened because of intercourse during an inauspicious time. For those, people see it. This is also being compiled by Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva has Trikalagya. He has this ability to see past, present, and future in very penetrating ways, and perhaps uncomfortably penetrating ways, right? Are we going to be in some version of the Bhagavatam in the future where we're being studied? I don't know. But I don't think so. But certainly not. The point being, it's for the benefit of all of us. And many times you can't stop it from being perceptible by great souls. Like when we come in front of a great soul, like, Prabhupada, like many devotees have said when they came in front of Prabhupada, they didn't say a word to Prabhupada. Prabhupada penetrated into their eyes and knew their whole life. And they said, and he would say exactly what they needed. And they would be like shocked. How did that happen? So this point about confidentiality is very important, as from a devotee care perspective or from a friend perspective or anyone that, for sure, keeping confidence and keeping confidentiality is very, very important. But many times you can't help but it being public information by those who can perceive the consciousness behind and therefore the actions that led to that particular state of consciousness. We may think it's secret. And we see, in fact, one of the arguments in one of these purports is, we're going to be in a private space. How's Lord Shiva going to see? And I think it's in the next verse or the next few verses. One of the few verses that Lord Shiva has 3 eyes. He sees everything. You can't hide. And even the Bhagavatam later in the 5th canto is discussed. You think you're having private affairs with your wife in the room? There's 10 witnesses simultaneously, etc., etc., etc. So there's many. So one has to be careful because we think things are confidential when in reality it may not be. So that's some thoughts on that.
And this principle that we follow within devotee care, that you seek consent before you share someone else's story, I wonder, if that applies in these situations where, like, did these consent was sought, or all these other personalities we read about, if their consent was sought before their stories have been shared for posterity.
Well, she may be a different person altogether. She may not even be Diti anymore. She probably doesn't identify with that body and the urge that body had, right? So if there's detachment, then you don't care. Yeah, sure, tell my story. It's not my story. It was that particular body and the urges that came with that body. Who knows? Obviously, I don't know. But yeah, generally one should certainly seek consent.
And perhaps these great personalities have such a strong mood of service that they don't, that they're happy for their story to serve the devotees.
Possibly.
Thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Any other comment or thought, reflection?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Prabhupada. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for taking this in a very detailed explanation. 2 things for me, as you were saying, how it's very easy for us to take things for granted and go to that familiarity zone with the devotees, or I don't know about the holy name, but I'm particularly thinking about the devotees and spiritual master or the senior devotees who are guiding us. You mentioned a particular word which are coming from the divine aspect, which have the divine aspect. But somehow, particularly for the peers who are among us, and then a little more senior, it's not very easy to see that divine aspect in them, unfortunately. And so either way, whether we are close to them in not like a really intimate or something, but very close, friendly relationship or something, or in a averse mood, like kind of envy or whatever was going on, it's very easy to get lost in that space as Diti was in. And she was like, it's okay. He's our family person. He's not going to be bothered. Even if he is, we can go and say something. You did mention a point. We should not become averse to becoming close to them, but at the same time, we should not become too close. So just want to hear your further thoughts on that. I know probably it's an internal mood. It's not like something we can exhibit, but from your experience or some examples, if you would like to share.
The important point, and we hear this from Prabhupada in the story of Queen Kunti praying to Krishna, that soul to soul relationships are established by the via medium of the super soul. Very important. So the internal mood, which is largely, back to your first comment about the holy name, is largely based on how one connects with the holy name that we see other devotees. Our appreciation and therefore respect, starting with appreciation, grows by appreciating Krishna and having some affinity for Krishna. And because of that, if a devotee has some also is trying to connect with Krishna, then there's a very natural flow of appreciation, a very natural flow of respect that helps us to see them properly. So the soul to soul relationship is established through the via medium of the super soul. It's a very simple statement, but it's deeply profound, and one that is realized by maturity that doesn't come easily. And it's not something that happens by just theoretically understanding it either. So I guess my comment would be that for us to be protected from becoming too intimate that we become familiar, same thing in a husband-wife relationship, is largely dependent on how much appreciation, genuine appreciation, we carry in our hearts. And that appreciation is largely dependent on how we see them in relation to Krishna. And that's dependent on our own chanting of the holy name. So as Shradhika likes to quote Maharaj a lot, it all starts in the bead bag. It's very true. It all starts in the bead bag. Anyway, those are some thoughts. What do you think? You have probably lots of realizations in the subject too.
Oh my. I don't know. This is really amazing. It happened to me a couple times, asking questions to Guru Maharaj in the class. I was thinking I'm asking a completely different question on the different subject, but how it comes to the chanting and the relationship with the holy name, it's very beautiful. And the way you have brought the connection in the end, giving that essence, how each thing is dependent on that. It's really bringing to that foundation. And, I'm also appreciating His Holiness Rampa Swami Maharaj. I have heard these comments, Maharaj, again and again. He just talks about chanting and, just the basics, chanting and hearing. But how both the foundation and the whole building is actually rests on that. That's where it starts and that's where it rests.
Even the relationship with the spiritual master, very early in our Krishna consciousness, Sri Adhika asked Maharaj a question, gosh, maybe 20 years ago. And the way Maharaj described it was something that, a visual that has stuck with me. She was asking a question around relationship with the spiritual master. And Maharaj made a comment that your relationship with Krishna is even foundational to your relationship with spiritual master. And he says that if you don't see that relationship properly with the spiritual master, it's like a whole house of cards, it all falls down. The visual of a house of cards being built without seeing Krishna in the picture, which, by the way, your picture has Krishna in it. It's very beautiful. It's right appropriate for this comment. And, if you don't see Krishna in the picture, then even relationship with the spiritual master can all, kind of fall like a house of cards. Interesting, huh?
Very beautiful. Thank you, Prabhu. I have one other comment or sharing, but I'll let others speak. If no one else has something, I can share.
Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, on this aspect of Lord Shiva being the most elevated, I don't know, it could be my immaturity of not able to hear it properly and not able to grasp it properly in the beginning when I was hearing. Uh, Somehow it seemed like we put down the demigods. I don't know, in probably our effort to show Krishna consciousness is something higher than what I was following earlier, or I don't know what's the psychology behind it, but this has been on my mind for some time. It seems like we don't go to the temples, obviously demigod temples, or we don't definitely take the prasadam. That's what my understanding. When we go to like Lemon temple or Balaji temple, um, we were kind of advised not to take prasadam. We don't know what kind of prasadam and anything. Anyway, but at least this aspect of we don't keep them on the altar. We do keep our spiritual masters who are like the great devotees of the Lord. And when you were sharing about this, all very wonderful qualities and how amazing his prasadam is, um, I was just thinking about that. If you would like to share.
Well, we don't not respect the demigods. We deeply respect the demigods. In fact, Lord Shiva, my goodness, Lord Chaitanya visits so many Lord Shiva temples. Even Lord Ramachandra visits Lord Shiva temples. Yesterday we were singing that song Jai Radhe Jai Krishna, and in that song it speaks about Gopeshwara Mahadev. That's in Vrindavan. So we were worshipping Lord Shiva in that song too. I don't necessarily see that we don't respect and worship the demigods. Of course, we don't personally like have demigods on our altar because Krishna specifically advises that way, right? Kameste Rita Jnana Prapadyante Anadevata. He very clearly in the 7th chapter and 9th chapter of the Gita, Krishna tells us to direct our energy towards him and not to the demigods, because generally people worship or approach the demigods for that singular purpose of what's in it for me? What's my material benefit? Again, early in our Krishna consciousness, I remember this exchange with our spiritual master where this whole section of the second canto that discusses, worship of this demigod gives you this benefit, the worship of that demigod gives you that benefit. And devotees were asking, can we not approach Krishna, the demigods, for the purpose of approaching Krishna? Absolutely, that's okay. If we approach demigods and even worship them for the purpose of approaching Krishna or trying to receive their blessings to connect with Krishna, that's absolutely okay. But generally, that's not what people do. So it is advised. Even, Rupa Goswami says, worship Ganesh, active devotion. But Prabhupada said he didn't give it to us to worship Ganesh because he said that we will have a lot of material desires and we might approach Ganesh for that material desire. Therefore, we worship Lord Narasimhadev instead, from who Ganesh receives the ability to prevent to remove material obstacles. He's getting that benediction or that power from Narasimhadev, so we just worship Narasimhadev. But even Rupa Goswami says to worship Ganesh. So the mood of our acharyas, the mood of great personalities like Lord Ramachandra and Mahaprabhu, they all worship and offer deep respect to the demigods, as should we at the same time recognizing that our love is to be fully directed to Krishna. Material mindset is to make, buckets good and bad. So it's easy to say, Krishna's good and demigod's bad. I mean, that kind of mindset is the binary mindset, is the material mindset, and hopefully we grow out of it. Is that okay? What do you think?
Thank you. Yeah, this last point, I think it really hit me. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you. All right, any final comment or question before we close? Say 23.
Maybe I'll just further ask on that. Like, I don't remember, but I don't see Lord Shiva's appearance days are in our calendar. Not only Lord Shiva, even Hanuman, I don't think so. Even right. So I'm just wondering, maybe it's a cultural aspect of our particular line of disciple succession, that we worship only important days related to our own disciple succession. So I'm just wondering.
Shiva Ratri is on our calendar.
Oh, okay. But we never celebrate, right? So none of the temples celebrate.
There's some temples that do celebrate. Sure.
Oh, okay.
When we were in St. Louis, when we were living in St. Louis, I remember being part of the decision of whether we celebrate or not and how we celebrate, and we did celebrate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I remember giving classes on Lord Shiva's, on Lord Shiva for Shivaratri. Yeah.
Mm.
Not every temple does, but yeah, many do. Part of it may be fear of being cautionary, of honoring great demigods, and how would people feel? How would that dissuade people from Krishna? So if people don't see it properly, and maybe that's the caution behind not making a big deal of it, is people might get bewildered and switch directions when that's not intended necessarily. Because people see all bucketized. It's like there's Shiva and there's Krishna and there's whoever else, and so you can worship anyone. It's Shiva who directs us to Krishna. If we don't understand that, and general public doesn't understand that, then it can be a little risky to celebrate something like that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, Prabhu. Thank you so much. So I just want to share that. I mean, the title of the class, right? Beware of the familiarity. So I mean, in this case of Diti, and also the example that you gave about, Mukunda Maharaj with Prabhupada. I mean, it's very easy to get familiar with people with whom we are seeing every day, right? I mean, but if somebody is little far from us, right, we will respect them. But if somebody is very close to us, we will know all the things, and then we'll take it for granted, and then try to be more familiar. Yeah, it's like, it's very, very challenging situation to be. I mean, we always need to keep ourselves reminded, right? So, I mean, we should not become very familiar. I mean, of course, it has to come with the culture. It's not that it's external thing, as you said. Again, we don't want to be keeping the distance away. I mean, in the sense, not even with the deities, right? I mean, the example that you gave other two devotees, it's very, very, touching, because it's very easy to, make that mistake when somebody is doing that dance, or doing the deity worship, but again, not feeling regret of making that mistake is a big challenge. I mean, of course, we don't want to make that mistake first place, but it may happen in some scenarios. But yeah, how one takes that. Oh, I'm worshiping the deity, or I am doing this dancing. So yeah, it just fell down, right? So if that attitude is different than the feeling regret, of course, doing dancing is not wrong thing. But again, I was just thinking about that, Prabhu. I mean, how easy to become familiar, and keep ourselves, at least remember what is the uh, what is that we are trying to achieve, right? In this whole relationships or in the everything that we are giving the holy name. I'm chanting every day. What is it? I can say Krishna. So it's so easy. I was just thinking, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thanks for the reflections. I'll share with you a mistake I made recently that I felt very deeply, and we'll end with this because of time. Um, I felt so bad, but I was dressing a little Gornitai, undressing them for putting them to bed, and he fell from the table that I was dressing, like actually fell on the ground. Not on, he didn't fall on the table. He fell from the table onto the ground, and I was so distraught. It was like a terrible, terrible night. I don't know. Let's see what kind of reaction I received for that, but oh my goodness, it was like really painful. Not a very good note to end on. But
Yeah, but good lesson.
anyway, you gotta be very careful. Yeah. So I'm like super careful now. Like really careful of how I bring the deities to the table to dress them. Okay, we'll end there. Thank you all very much.
Thank
I
you
have
so
another
much.
call at 8:30 I gotta get to. So hope you have a wonderful Saturday. Thank you for participating. Really appreciate your being here.